So let's start with the first of these 3 lectures. So for you, it's lecture number 3, and we will talk about network models. Okay, so mainly about Erdős-Rényi random graphs, and we'll talk also a bit about the configuration model. I will tell you what is that. So first, the word model. If you talk with scientists, you will soon realize that it's not unified at all what people mean by model. So let me precise what I mean by model is something very stupid and at least very constrained. Me, when I talk about model, I mean random generation of synthetic objects. So here I mean my object is networks, is graphs, okay? So I want a process to generate a graph with some randomness inside this process, and this is what I call a model. Okay, why are people interested in this? It's because when you have a way to generate synthetic graphs, you can use them to simulate a lot of things. Okay, so you can simulate phenomenon that happens on your graph. You can simulate the behavior of algorithms or maybe the behavior of protocols, and you want to analyze how all these things behave on your network. So why you want to do this? Because you want to design better algorithms or protocol. You want to test what happens in this situation for a phenomenon. You want to predict how a phenomenon will behave, and in the end what you want to do is you want to better understand all this and what is the relation between this phenomenon, this algorithm, these protocols, and the structure of the network on which they occur. So typical question, for example, you would like to answer, maybe you want to know if the internet protocols as they are defined today, if they will still be efficient in some years from now, for example, when we move to Internet of Things, and that we will have an amazing amount of objects connected on the Internet. So if you want to do this, you would like to know if these protocols, they will behave good in a larger network. So what do you want to do? You would like to generate a network with similar properties like the one of the Internet, and bigger, for example, 10 times larger, and simulate the behavior of protocol. So you cannot do this with even if you add the actual map of the Internet, which is impossible to get. Even if you add that, you could not answer the question, what happens when the Internet is bigger? So what you can do is you can generate networks of different sizes that look like the Internet, some bigger, for example. Of course, when you do this, you assume, which is not true, that if the Internet go larger, it will stay with the same structure. But this is not clear at all. Okay, so that's typically the kind of things that people want to do with models, with random generation of synthetic networks. And actually, let me say in another way, the last point, better understand, is very crucial. Actually, it's the Graal. If you want, we want to describe real-world objects, okay, that you encounter in different contexts. The Graal will be the problem with these objects is that they have no mathematical definition. So the model is a way to give them a mathematical definition and to say these networks, they are exactly the graphs that are generated in this way. Okay, which is very difficult, and we don't have a very good model for all of these networks. I will discuss the 2 best we have, and you will see they are good for some things and not so good for other things. Okay, so when I say you want to generate random networks, let me put it clear that you want to generate random networks with prescribed properties. You want that they have the same properties like the networks you observe like the one you observe on networks in practice in real-world context, like the networks you like maybe social network or citation network or co-occurrence of words in sentences, etc. Any kind of network you can imagine. So maybe you think it's a little bit a stupid goal because these networks that we encounter in practice, maybe they are very different from each other. So how can I design a model that will reproduce their properties? So they are to some extent different, but they are also, they share important properties in common. So I think you already know about this. So they have, for example, a low global density. Okay, what does it mean? It means that M, the number of edges, is small. Okay, is much smaller than the number of possible edges, the number of pairs in the network. Okay, so M for me it will be the number of edges, and N is always the number of nodes in the network. So they have a low global density. Okay, what does it mean? It means you take a random pair in the network. The probability that they are connected is exactly this stuff. It's the number of edges divided by the number of couples. Okay, so this stuff is low. Okay, it's very small compared to 1. I don't know if you take a typical network, maybe it's 10 to the 6th or 10 to the 5th, something like this. Okay. Despite of this, they have short distance. I say despite because if you have not so many edges, it does not help to make short distance in the network, right? But despite of this, they have short distances. So what do I mean by short distances? I mean the average distance is small. You can think of it as being constant or maximum logarithmic. Okay, something like that. And it's also true, usually it's also true with the diameter. But some networks, they have bigger diameter, but usually when they have a large diameter, they still have short average distance. Okay? Diameter, you know what is that? Is the maximum distance in the network. So they have short distances, so they start to be interesting because you see they have few edges, but they realize very short distance even with few edges. Okay? We see today that this is just a property of randomness. Okay, it's because they are random in some way. They contain some part of randomness that they are like this, contracted in distance. They have heterogeneous degrees. So I think you get a lecture already about that. So if you plot the degree distribution, it usually does not decrease in an exponential way. It decreases in some polynomial way. Meaning what? Meaning that even if you go until very large degree, you still have a proportion of nodes having this degree. When you have an exponential decrease, if you augment a little bit the degree, the decrease of the exponential makes that there is no one anymore in this part of the distribution. Okay, so they have heterogeneous degree usually. And finally, they have a high local density, and this is very interesting because it is completely opposite. It's not completely opposite, but yeah, a little bit. Is that they have a high local density when their global density is low. So what does it mean? So high local density, I think also you saw this notion. Stop me if you did not see it. Clustering coefficient. So you look at the proportion of this kind of stuff in the network that are close by an edge. Taking two vertices U and V that are in the neighborhood of another vertex, you want to know what is the probability that there is an edge. Okay, and this is much higher than the global density. Okay, so this very often it can be in the order of 10 to minus 2 or even 10 to minus 1, which is much higher than the things I said before for the global density. Okay, so it's usually some order of magnitude above the global density. So it's very funny, these networks. They have very few edges. These edges, they are grouped locally in the neighborhood of the vertices, but they still achieve a low distance. So you don't have so many, you want to do, think of it like this, you want to do a low distance, so you want to contract to find very short passes in the networks, but you have few edges, and moreover, you have to put them locally in the neighborhood of the vertices. So it's a bit funny. So the reason for this is that even if you have a very low part of randomness, like some connections that are taken at random in the network, completely at random, even if you have a low part of this, it makes the distance very short. So random is, I said before, this comes from randomness, but randomness is very powerful to this regard. A little bit of randomness, it's enough to make short distances. Okay. Okay, so we will discuss about this a little bit more in details. And so what will be the goal of the network modeling topic? It will be to have a model to generate synthetic networks that have these 4 properties. Okay, so in a generic way, I will explain what I mean by this. So to be more precise is you give me a global density, you give me a number, okay? You say the global density should be like this. You say the average distance should be like this. You say here is the degree distribution that I want, okay? And I want a clustering coefficient of this, okay? Clustering coefficient, I don't know, 0. Too much. Let's say 0.08. And you ask me to generate, to pick at random, a network with, usually you also give the number of vertices, right? If not, I don't know the size of the network, it's difficult to generate. And you want a network that have exactly these properties, that have this density, this average distance, this distribution, this clustering coefficient, and you want to pick the network uniformly, randomly, among all the networks having these characteristics. Okay? I see your eyes when I say this. You are right, it's almost impossible. Okay? But we can relax on this. This is the goal. This will be the ideal model. And when I say in a generic way, generic, for me, it means the greatest level of genericity I imagine is like this. You pick at random among all the networks having these properties. Because you have some models that give networks with these 4 properties, but they give particular networks with these 4 properties. Okay? It means they generate them in a way that is not so general and that you cannot ensure that you generate all the networks having this kind of properties. You generate some of them that have more properties, the properties of your generation process. So the best, what I would like to achieve, what everyone dreams to achieve, is to generate something that is only dependent, not of course on the generation process, but only on the properties you aim at. Okay, so I should say something, a disclaimer before we continue. I should say that among the 3 lectures I will give, and maybe also among all the lectures you will receive in this course, this one may be the more technical one. So don't be afraid. The important thing, if you are not very used with mathematics, maybe it's a little bit harsh for you, but don't be afraid. The important thing is that you get the general ideas of what I say. So you can ask if you are not sure of what is the important thing inside what I am saying. And I think it's more scary than difficult. You will see, now we will start to have some formula, but the formula is always something that, at least for me, that makes me scared, but it's very basic mathematics. So we do a little bit of probability, but it's very basic stuff. And I think it's nice to see that with very basic tools, we can reason, and we can have some properties of this Erdős-Rényi models. So the Erdős-Rényi random graphs, what is that? It's the simplest model you can imagine. Okay, you just consider the number of nodes in the network and the number of edges, and you want to generate a network with this number of nodes and this number of edges uniformly at random. So there are 2 models actually. The one that I just said, what you do is that you pick uniformly at random one network with n nodes and m edges. Okay, so that's the first model. The second model is that you make it a little bit different. You say for each couple of vertices, I will put an edge between them with probability p, and you choose p as you like. Okay, so this one is called G and P, and the previous one is called G and M. Okay, so they are very related, these two models. how would you choose the probability P if you want to have m edges? What should be the probability P that you choose? So, yeah.
Maybe if we want to have a certain density, we would make it equal to the density.
Yes, so P is exactly the density, and now I want to convert it in number of edges. So let's do it. But this does not work anymore. Okay, not good. So let's do it quietly. So if you talk about the density, it means that P is your proportion to connect your n times n minus 1 divided by 2 couples. And this is exactly the number of edges you will get in expectation. Okay? You play with probability P on all these couples. Okay? So you get this number of couples that are linked with an edge. So it should be something like this. So P, if you take P, 2m like this, then what you get with this generation process and with this generation process look very much alike. Okay. So we say that they are essentially equivalent. If you take this P, these two models, they are more or less the same. What do we mean by this? If you analyze their property in expectation, you will find the same property. Okay. So today we'll talk about connectedness, about distances, about giant components. They have essentially the same properties with regard to this. So they are very similar if you take this P, but they are not exactly the same, right? Why they are not exactly the same? Yes, exactly. So it means that on average they have m edges. It means that sometimes they don't have m edges exactly. So that's the main difference. With this one, you are sure that you will consider only networks with exactly m edges, and with this one, they will have around m edges. Is it really around, or is it? Can it be far from m edges? Yeah. It should depend a little bit, yes, but not that much. So for us, we think of these objects as very large objects. So we will be interested in n very large. So like tending to infinity, if we talk about mathematical models. So what is the thing that makes them that they have very close to m edges? It's the law of large number, right? When you do a large number of trials, it's very concentrated around the mean. Okay, so this stuff, they have very close to m edges. I mean, it's very concentrated. The probability that it's more than a constant proportion away from m, it tends to 0 when n tends to infinity. Okay, so they are very similar, but not exactly the same. So my question is that should we use G and M or G and P? But I gave the answer immediately. Don't look at this. So if I want to really make it for real, I want to generate network. Okay, so I want to obtain some data of some random network. So which one will you choose? Will you choose GNM or GNP if you want to implement it and to get some network with that? So try to figure out what will you do for each of them. So for GNP, I think it's pretty clear. Yes?
Generating the networks, I think GNM could be justified because in GNP we have to consider all the pairs of vertices.
Yes.
And square them.
Yeah.
And if we choose a relatively sparse network, we will have to do a lot of work for pretty much nothing if m is really smaller than n squared.
Yes, I completely agree with you. The problem with GNP is that if you want to implement it, it's pretty much straightforward. You have to consider the couples one by one and to play with probability P whether you put an edge or not between these two vertices. But then you will have to consider all couples, it's n squared. So your complexity of your generator will be like order n squared. And it's really a pity because in the end you just want to generate a network with m edges, and I said m is very low. They have very low global density, so you don't want to m scales like n. Okay, you can think of them like the average degree is bounded. So it's a pity, and if you use GNM, you don't have this problem. GNM, you will just choose m couples of vertices. So m times you choose two vertices and you say, okay, I put an edge between these two. So the complexity is only order m. So no need to do more suspense. Yes, if you want to generate networks, you will use G and m, and you guess that in this case, so this is order m, the complexity, and the complexity of generating G and P is order n squared. So that's why for generating you prefer G and m. And for mathematical analysis, so you can guess that I prefer G and P, at least that's what I will do today. And what is the nice thing with G and P compared to G and M? So this is the kind of general ideas you have to get, even if you don't get the details of all that. If I want to do some mathematics with this stuff, there is something nice and practical with G and P to analyze probability, is that the event of having an edge or not, they are completely independent, right? Because I play for each couple, I play independently whether I put an edge or not, which is not completely true with the other one, which is not true with the other one, because with the other one, if you already put m-1 edges, the probability that you will get the last one is much lower than at the beginning. Okay, so knowing that there is already this number of edges, the probability is different. When for G and P, knowing that there is already this number of edges, you don't care. The probability that you get an edge is P. That's all. Okay. So that's why today we will analyze G and P, and if we have to generate networks, we will use G and M. So this stuff is what? Yeah. Okay. Should I talk about this? So this stuff, the first time it was analyzed is in, I think it's in 1959 by Erdos and Reni. And I think they really analyze G and M, which is nicer in some way, but which is more difficult. Okay, and we will do some analysis of G and P. Okay. So if you want to really implement, so the complexity of G and M, we said it already, it's order M. If you want to really implement it, what will you do? You will do this. You will pick m times two vertices uniformly at random among the vertices. So you have a random generation, a random generator of numbers. You choose one number between 0 and n-1, which are the identifiers of your vertices. Okay, you have n vertices between 0 and n-1. You choose two random numbers inside this, and you say, okay, it's an edge. Okay. So you choose A, you choose B in this range, and you say AB is an edge in my network. Are you pleased with that? I like when you are pleased, but in some way I would prefer that you are not so pleased with that right now. Yes?
We don't take time to the same vertices.
Yes, that's the problem, that there is a risk that we choose two times the same couple of vertices. So we want to put two times an edge in the same place. So it's okay, afterward we can remove it, but then we don't get exactly m edges as we wanted in G and M. Okay, so there is a risk of collision, right? So what can you do? There is also a risk of something even. There is a risk of self loop. Okay. Collision, I mean multiple edges. So there is a risk of self loop. It's easy to deal with that. When you get 2 times the same vertices in your edge, you just reject it. Okay, and you still preserve uniformity. What you want to keep is that you are uniform. But if you reject the self loops, you are still uniform on the rest of edges. It's no problem. But if you reject these things, I don't know. So what will you do? Yeah.
You can make a loop until you have m time.
Yeah.
Edges.
Yeah.
And then reject any collision and self-loop.
Yes. So actually, you answer the question I just formulate is that actually, if you reject the multiple edges, it's still uniform. Okay. If you want to pick at random without putting back the things you picked, you can put them back, and when you pick them again, just throw them again. Okay. So it preserves also uniformity. So what you can do is you can pick until you get m distinct edges. Okay, and it's still uniform. Oh, but now I start to be afraid because I don't know how long will that take to get m distinct edges. Maybe it's not order m now; it start to be very long. Maybe it's order nm, or maybe I will never get m edges. Yes. Yes, I agree. I agree with the intuition you give, is that the probability of a collision is actually very low. First, because I want to generate networks with very few edges, but even if I want to generate networks with density 1/2, okay? If you want to generate networks with density more than 1/2, just generate the complement. But if you generate a networks with a density not exceeding 1/2, what is the probability of collision? It cannot be worse than 1/2. It is worst at the end, when you have picked already a lot of edges. But it's not worse than 1/2. So at most, you will have to pick 2 times more of edges, okay, if you in expectation compared to m. So it's just a constant factor different to get m edges. You can still say that you will get that in order m time. Okay? Very good. So now you know to generate networks, and you can do that if you need. We said about this. So now we want to check the properties of this GNP model, the Erdős-Rényi model with probability P. And I want to check the 4 properties I mentioned before. I want to know if it has a low global density. Yes, it has, because you choose it. You choose the P. Yes?
I didn't understand well the first, so how we generate the edges. We pick random vertices until we get n distinct one.
So what you do is that, so I'm not sure of what is your question, but what you do is that you do a random in the range 0 and -1. Okay, you do it 2 times. You choose so this is considered to be constant time. Okay, you have to have a pseudo random generator, and you say, okay, I put an edge between I and B, and I do this until I get m distinct couples AB.
So you just described the...
Yes, yes. So there is a question in the complexity that actually I did not mention, is that how can you check that you already got this edge or not? Yeah. Sorry, I did not hear you. Yes, and how efficient is it to search in this? Yeah.
It would be approximately the length of our edges.
Yes, so it's not that efficient. So there is a question of how do you implement this? So I highlight it as an open question for you, but it's an interesting question. There is a way, I think, to implement it in an efficient way. I think you don't need to inflate this complexity, but I'm not sure about this. Yeah. Or maybe. Okay. So first I wanted to know if this GNP models has a low global density or not, and as I said, this is exactly the parameter you take for the model. So you control exactly the density you want because you choose the P, and the P controls the number of edges in the way we mentioned already. Okay, so it has a low global density, no problem, and moreover, like we said already, by the law of large numbers, M should be very concentrated around its mean. Okay. So you have the number of edges you like. Does it have short distances? So here I will talk about this in details in the rest of the lecture, but I would like also to give the basic arguments that we usually give for this. So you can treat this question in 2 hours like we will do today, or you can treat it in 2 minutes like I will do now. So usually people they say yes, it has short distances because of the expansion property, and it's true. And this is one of the general idea I want you to get. These random networks, the Erdős-Rényi network at least, and many others, they have this expansion property. So what is the expansion property? In graph theory, we say that a graph is a C vertex expander, a C expander, if and only if for every subset of vertices that contains less than half of the vertices, it expands very quick. What does it mean? It means that if you see the neighbors of this vertex, so I think you know what is this notation, you take the neighbors of the vertices, okay, out. So this is S, and this is the neighbors out of S, okay. So the cardinality, the number of neighbors out of S, should be at least a constant times the size of S. So this is what we call expansion property. It means you take a set which is not too big, because if it's too big you cannot guarantee this constant. If you take all the vertices minus 1, then of course you don't have any constant. So if it's less than half of the vertices, if it's not too big, it expands very quickly. When you see what are the edges, when you look at the edges going out of it, they discover a constant times the size of S new vertices. And because of this, it makes the distances very short. Okay, so the random graphs, they have this property. Okay, if you do it in very, did I do that or not? Yes. What is the expansion of G and M? But just consider one thing like this. What is the number of neighbors outside? Each of them, they have about, so I will call K like this, the average degree. So they more or less, each of them, they have this number of neighbors. Some of them are inside S, and some are outside S. But S should not be more than half of the vertices. So the expansion is about this, right? About half of their degree is, at least half of their degree is out of the set. And if you neglect everything like a collision, because some of them they have the same neighbors, etc., you get that for these random networks you have a constant expansion which scales more or less like half of the mean degree. Okay, so this is half of the mean degree. The mean degree is like this. Okay. So they have an expansion property that makes what happen? That makes that you have an exponential growth of the ball centered around one vertex. When you see the ball of distances, distance 1, distance 2, distance 3, it grows at least exponentially with a constant 1 plus c. Okay? So c is a small number usually. Okay, it's a fraction. So like this, if you have an exponential growth of the balls of growing distance, it means that your diameter will be logarithmic. Okay? So this is true only if you neglect all the collision, etc. So we do a little bit more precise analysis today about this. Okay? But the main idea is that because of randomness, you have an exponential growth, you have an expansion property that makes an exponential growth of the ball center around one vertex of the graph. Is it clear, this property? Do you have question about this? Yeah? Do they have an heterogeneous degree distribution? So we fix the average degree. Okay, we fix the average degree like it's a constant. The average degree is a constant, so I choose p lambda over n minus 1. So p is not a constant. P may depend on n. Okay, but I choose the average degree lambda, which is exactly p times n minus 1. Why? Because you have n minus 1 neighbors, and you choose if you are connected to them with probability p. So the number of expected neighbors you have is p n minus 1. Okay. So the probability that your degree is k is that for these n minus 1 vertices, for k of them, you succeeded with probability p, and for n minus 1 minus k of them, you lose with probability 1 minus p. You don't put an edge, okay? And you sum over all the way to choose k neighbors among the n minus 1 possible. Okay. So the probability that your degree is exactly k is that you are connected to these k vertices, or you are connected exactly to these k vertices, or exactly to these k vertices. There is this number of possibilities for choosing k vertices, and every time for one of these possibilities, this is the probability that it happens exactly like you want. You put edges with your neighbors and non-edges with your non-neighbors. So if I rearrange all this, so this is the number of combination, right? And I write it as the number of arrangements. So the number of arrangements, you know, it's n times n minus 1 times s minus 2 until n plus 1 minus k. So this is the number of combinations that you have to recognize here. The p, I write it like lambda over n minus 1. So it's just a rewriting of this. Here, the same. And what do I get? I can separate things. I invert these two things, and I get on this side the number of arrangements k among n and n to the k. So it's the same power. This stuff will tend to a constant, okay, to 1. So this when n tends to now I will fix lambda as a constant, and I make n tend to infinity. Okay. So what I want is that this stuff will tend to 1. This stuff, I like it, I keep it. This stuff, k is also fixed, okay? So I will do simple convergence. So k, I fix the k and I look for 1k, what happens? For 1 degree, what happens? So I fix k, so this stuff will tend to 0, so this will tend to 1 as well. And this stuff, maybe you know, if you are a little bit involved in mathematics, it should tend to exponential of this stuff, of minus lambda. This is another way to write the exponential series. And finally, what you get is that it tends to, for a fixed k, fixed lambda, it tends to lambda k exponential minus lambda over factorial k. And this stuff is ugly. I agree with you if you don't like it, but it's the Poisson law. Okay, the Poisson law it's a kind of law that is very homogeneous. It's exponential decay, as you can see from the dependence on k. Okay, it's more than factorial in the bottom. So when k grows, it goes down faster than an exponential, and it's so it's a very common law that you encounter in many places. A little bit less like the normal law of errors. This one is not symmetric. So this is usually the one, if you play to put things in an unconstrained domain, both on the left and on the right, maybe you will get a normal distribution. But if you play to place things only on one side, you cannot get something which is symmetric because you are bounded by 0 on this side, and very often you get a kind of Poisson law. Okay? Don't know how to draw it. But they have the similar properties that they are very homogeneous, concentrated around their mean, exponential decay. Okay. So it's not heterogeneous at all. So that's why here I put a red cross. I wanted something heterogeneous, and it's very homogeneous. So it's unlike what I observe in nature. Okay, in the real world context, I'm usually interested in. Take it with some kind of circumspection. Okay. Usually, most of the networks, they have this heterogeneous degree property, but not all of them. If you take, for example, a rod network, it will not be heterogeneous because you don't have a crossroad with 1,000 rods coming in the crossroad. Okay? So most of the time it's heterogeneous, but not always. So this one, at least, is something that we wanted to get, and we don't get it with the Erdős-Rényi. It's one of the reasons why this model cannot pretend to be a good model for all kinds of networks we encounter. Another question is it clustered? Is it highly clustered? So what is the probability to get an edge in the neighborhood of a vertex? You remember what is the clustering coefficient? I got 2 vertices in the neighborhood of another one, and I wonder if there is an edge here. What is the probability? It's what? Yeah, it's just P, like everywhere. Okay, if you take in the GNP model, so just forget GNM for some time, GNP model, we said it's independent for all the corpus of vertices. So it's in the neighborhood of someone or not in the neighborhood of someone, it's in the complicated configuration of the graph or not, I don't care. The probability to have an edge here is P. Okay, so finally, in the neighborhood of a vertex, the probability to get an edge is exactly the same as the probability to get an edge everywhere. So it's exactly the definition of not being clustered. Okay, I told you being clustered, it means that the probability to get an edge locally in the neighborhood is much higher than getting an edge in anywhere in the network. Okay, so yeah, it's not clustered at all. That's why I put again a red cross here. So finally, we got the log global density because it's a parameter of the model. And what is nice is that we get short distance. It's a property of randomness, as I mentioned in the beginning, and we will develop a little bit about this. Okay. So let's see if I have time to talk about everything I wanted to talk today. Maybe yes. But maybe I have to be a little bit quicker on the rest. But I don't want to be quick, okay? I want you to follow and to understand, especially if you are not involved in this stuff. So just stop me if I go too fast or if you feel it's not enough details or not enough explanations. So now what I want to study is phase transition. What is phase transition? Is this. It's how you go when, so you see here P, the thing, so there is always 50 nodes, and it's an Erdős-Rényi GNP, okay, with n equal 50. What is changing is the probability P to put an edge. Okay? I started from 0.01, 1 over 100, and I move slightly to 1, slowly to 1 over 10. Okay? And doing this, you see that you start from a domain where the networks are like this, very sparsely connected. I mean, there is almost no components than more than 2 nodes. And every time you put an edge, you have already 2 nodes. So there are very few edges that are connected between them, like here. And after this, you move to a domain when you have some connectedness on some part of the network, and you have cycles start to have a non-trivial structure. Here it's mainly trees, very small trees. Here you start to have some cycles that appear in this stuff when you augment the probability. When you augment it again, you have what we call the giant component. Okay, so here most of the nodes in the network are in a single connected component. Connected component, for those that are not familiar with that, it means there is a path from one vertex to another by following some edges. Okay, they are connected. That's what we call a connected component. They are all attainable from each other by a path in the graph. So you have this giant connected component that appears. That giant, I will say later, it means constant fraction of the nodes, 80% of the node. Okay, and after the network become connected and even short in distances. Okay, so what is nice with this is that it's actually not a smooth process like I tend to describe it now. It's an evolution process, but it's binary. It's every time you go from one situation to another, not smoothly, but by a threshold. That if you are just below the threshold, you are like this. If you are just above the threshold, you are completely different. Okay. So the formal definition of a threshold, that is what we call phase transition. You change from one phase to another, okay, from one state of the network to another. It's like this. So remember that P depends on N. Okay, the probability depends on N. So you have a threshold function, T of N. It means that if the Pn over Tn tends to 0, so you separate between Pn over Tn tends to 0 or Pn over Tn tends to infinity. If Pn over Tn, so if you are a little bit less strong than Tn, if Pn is less strong than Tn, okay, if Pn is a small o of Tn less strong than Tn, then you have the property, you never have property A. And if Pn is stronger than Tn, if Tn is negligible in front of Pn, so in mathematics it means negligible. Then you have the opposite. You have A, the property A, surely, when n tends to infinity. Okay, so it means you take a property A. We say it as a threshold. If when you are just below the threshold, the property A is you get it with probability 0 when n tends to infinity, and if you are just above the threshold, you get it with probability 1. That's why I say it's binary. It's you don't get it, you never get it, or you always get it. Just below, just after the threshold. Okay, and this may be a little bit seem strong, but it's not strong. Okay, if you think in terms of function, it's really you are just a little bit less strong than Tn, you tend to 0. You are just a little bit stronger than Tn, you tend to infinity. Okay, so it really separates between the Pn that are a little bit less strong and a little bit stronger than Tn. So when we have this phenomenon, we have what we call a phase transition. As I said, it's the seminal work of Erdős and Rényi in the late 50s. Questions about this? Okay, so we start with connectivity. So connectivity, we will show a threshold function that is log n over n. So the T of n is log n over n. So if you have a probability that is less than log n over n, you will be not connected for sure. If you have a probability that is a little bit higher than log n over n, you will be connected for sure. Okay, that's what is nice, and it's even stronger. The way we will prove it is even stronger than the previous statement I give, tending to 0 and tending to infinity. It's just you take Pn is equal to a constant times log n over n. This is lambda is a constant. Okay, if this constant is strictly less than 1, then you are for sure not connected. If the constant is strictly more than 1, then you are for sure connected. Okay, So it's stronger because usually in the previous definition, what you require is that you just require that this stuff goes to 0 or to infinity, which is stronger requirement than the constant is less than 1 or the constant is more than 1. Okay. So even if it's equivalent up to a constant to log n over n, if the constant is a little bit more, 0.9, a little bit less, 0.9, or a little bit more, 1.1, then you have completely different behaviors when n tends to infinity. Okay. Maybe I prove this, yes, first. Let me see what happened with that. So is it like this? Okay. Okay, so to prove one, so what I want to prove is that I have lambda less than 1. I have lambda less than 1. I want to prove that for sure we are not connected, disconnected. The network is disconnected for sure. You remember that my probability is lambda over lambda times log n over n. Okay. So you will see it's very easy to show because what we will show is that the probability that there is at least one isolated node, it means one node without neighbors, tends to 1. So if you have one node without neighbors, you are disconnected. The network is disconnected. So I don't need to prove something complicated on the structure of the network. I just prove that if you are with lambda less than 1, then you have some isolated nodes for sure when n tends to infinity. So it's very easy to do because let's take the random variable I that says that node I is isolated. So I equal 1, it means that vertex I is isolated. I equals 0, isolated of I equals 0, it means it's not isolated. Okay? And let's see what is the probability that I is equal 1 or 0. So the probability that it is isolated, that I equal 1, is that for all the possible neighbors, n minus 1, you failed to put an edge. So it means that you lose n minus 1 time when you play with probability p. So it's 1 minus p exponent to the n minus 1. So this stuff, if you put p is equal, you remember, to lambda log n over n, this stuff is equivalent, as I said, to this, okay, to exponential of this, minus lambda log n. This is a mathematical trick I will use several times. So this is exactly n to the minus lambda. Okay. So now let's count the number. Now that we know for one node what is the probability to be isolated, it's easy to count the expected number of isolated nodes, right? We just have to multiply by the number of nodes. So the expected number of isolated nodes is n times n to the minus lambda. And of course, because we choose lambda less than 1, this stuff tends to infinity. Okay, it's n over n to the lambda, and lambda is less than 1. So it tends to infinity. So the number of the expected number of isolated nodes, it's tends to infinity. Does it mean that the probability that there is no isolated node tends to 0? No, sorry. What I mean, does it mean that the probability that there is at least one isolated node, does not tend to 0? So you get my point, that I want to show that there is at least one isolated node for sure. Now I'm very pleased because I prove that the expectation of the number of isolated nodes is huge. It goes to infinity. So does it mean that it's okay, I'm done? The probability to have one isolated node is more than a constant? No, it does not. It does not mean this. Okay. It does not mean that the probability that you have no isolated nodes tend to 0. Okay. Why? You can still have very often no isolated nodes. Okay. But when you let's say 1 over 2 times, you have no isolated nodes. But when you have isolated nodes, you have maybe all of them that are isolated. Okay. So the expectation will be around n over 2. Take a binary stuff. You have no isolated nodes, or they are all isolated. Okay. So the expectation of this is n over 2. It tends to infinity when n tends to infinity. But half of the time you have no isolated nodes. So you cannot say that the probability that there is no isolated nodes tend to 0. It's still 1 over 2. Okay. So we need more to show that really this probability that there is no isolated node is 0. You always have an isolated node. So what do we need? It's something very classic in the probability is that we need a concentration property. Okay. This behavior that I show is because it's very not concentrated around the mean. Sometimes I take no isolated nodes, and sometimes I take them all isolated. If they are always all around the number of expected number of isolated nodes, then you cannot get this behavior. Okay. So if it's concentrated, this distribution of isolated nodes around the mean, then it will be okay. So what talks about the concentration of random variables? So I want to talk about the concentration of X, the number of isolated nodes. I want to show that it's concentrated around the expectation of X. It's the variance. Okay. So the variance here we talk about X. It's the sum of IA. Okay. The number of connected nodes is exactly the sum of the isolated node is exactly the sum of IA, which says 0 or 1, the node is isolated or not. Okay. So the variance of a sum is the sum of the variance plus the sum of all the covariance. Okay, this is the probability stuff. And the variance, all these random variables, they are the same. So I2, I3, I4, they follow the same law like I1. So that's why I write that this sum is just n times I1. Each of them are identical. And the same for the covariance. Each couple of them, because they are all identical, each couple of them varies in the same way. So here I have n times n minus 1, the covariance between two of them. Okay. So let's make it explicit. What is the variance of this II? It's the variance by definition is this. It's the difference. So that's why it talks about the concentration. It's the difference between the expectation of the square and the square of the expectation. Okay. So what does it mean? If you did not do some probability for a long time, what does it mean? It means that I have a random variable which is distributed around an average that is this value. Let's say I don't know. I will call it L. Okay, L. The average is or A. The average is A. Okay. What is the average of my random variable to the square? What is the expectation of this? So the random variable x, its average is a. What is the average of x squared? Well, I don't know, but I would like it to be a squared. It would be nice, right? It's not a squared at all. Look, imagine you have a random variable that is in the numbers between the integers between 1 and n. Okay? And imagine that it is perfectly uniformly distributed. Same probability for 1, for 2, for 3, for 4, until n. What is the average of this random variable? Same probability for value 1, value 2, value 3, until value n. What is the average of this stuff? It's what? Yeah? But in average, how much is that? Same probability for getting 1, for getting 2, for getting 3, for getting n. In average, you get? Yes, n plus 1 over 2, okay? Let's say n over 2, you get n over 2. What is the average of the square? Same probability to get 1 square, 2 square, 3 to the square, 4 to the 2, 5 to the 2, 6 to the 2, until n to the 2. What is the sum of the square from 1 to n? What is the sum of the square? If I sum, so maybe I should write it. If I sum over I square, what is that? Very roughly speaking. I sum from I equal 1 to n. What is that? Okay, let's start slowly maybe. What is that? The sum of the first integer, yes? You talk about which one? This one or the first one? Yeah, it's n to the power 3. Okay, it's more or less this, because this one, when you sum the squares, you get n to the power 2. When you sum the I, you get n to the power 2. When you sum the square, you get 8 to the power 3. When you sum I to the k, you get n to the power k plus 1. Okay, it's like an integral. Okay, you just integrate a polynomial, and it's one more. Okay, so the mean of the square of my random variable I just mentioned would be like n cubed, when its average is we said it's n over 2, and the expectation of x cubed, I don't know what is that exactly, I don't want to know, but I know it's about n cubed. So do you think it behaves like the square of the mean? No, it's much bigger. Why it's much bigger? The intuition is because the variability around the mean, when you take the square, it amplifies it a lot. And this is what is talking the variance about. It's just this, okay? The variance is the difference between what you would like to be and what it is actually. So you would like to be this, and actually it's not this exactly. Okay? So it's the difference between the expectation of the square of the variable and the square of the expectation. So it talks exactly about, here it should be n squared over 4, and it's n cubed, and the variance is the difference between the two. Okay? So for us, the expectation of I square, I is 0 or 1, so the expectation of I square is exactly the probability to get 1, and it's q. The probability to get 0 is, we call it p, I guess. And this one to the square, so it's q squared. Okay. The covariance, you can define it in this way, and finally, if you just try to, you will get this. So the covariance is this is the expression. It's again the difference. So what you have for the square, you have it for the product. It's the difference between the expectation of the product and the product of expectation. So you would like it like this. You would like that the expectation of the product is the product of the expectations. It's not like this. The difference between the two is the covariance. Okay. And so finally this one we know what is that, again is Q, and we need to express this one. So this one is the expectation of I times I2. The value is 1 exactly when I1 is equal 1 and I2 equal 1, because if not it's 0, and it makes 0 when you make the product. So what you want is that 1 is isolated and 2 is isolated. So if you want that 1 and 2 are isolated, you have how many non-edges? Here you have n minus 2 remaining vertices. They should, all of them, have a non-edges to this. So it's 2 times n minus 2 non-edges plus 1 non-edges between them, 1 non-edge between them, and it makes something like this. Okay. So the probability that both I1 and both 1 and 2 are isolated is exactly, you lose for all these edges that become non-edges. Okay. So the probability is 1 minus p, like usual, times the number of non-edges you have is 2n minus 3. And when you put this, depending on Q, you get this expression. Okay. Where did we express what is Q? I don't know. Ah, yes, Q is like this. Okay, Q is 1 minus p to the n minus 1. Okay, so you get this stuff, and what do you do with that? But you can express exactly what is the variance of x. It's something like this when you take this expression, and I will make it short. So when n tends to infinity, then q tends to 0 and p tends to 0. Remember that q is what's it about this? So p tends to 0. This okay, this I get it. Why p tends to 0, but the other one I don't get it. So p is like this. So when n tends to infinity, p tends to 0, and q. Yes, because q. Okay, q is 1 minus p. So let's write it completely. To the n minus 1. And yes, okay, this also tends to 0 because of the log n, because it's less than exponential minus lambda log n. Okay, so q also tends to 0. Both of them, they tend to 0. So you can remove this stuff, and you can remove this stuff, and you are left with that nq plus n squared q squared p. If you replace what is q and what is p, you get something like this, and you get finally that the variance of x is like this, which is exactly the expectation of x. So does it mean it is concentrated or not? Yes, it's very concentrated, because it means that the difference between the expectation of the square of the variable and the square of expectation is not more than the average of the variable. So there is no this amplification phenomenon like I show you on the numbers from 1 to n. Okay. So with this is typically something that is very concentrated. So how do we use that? If we have the variance that is same order of magnitude as the expectation, we have that the variance, of course. So the variance, the definition, you remember what is the definition? The primary definition is that it's the expectation of the difference between the value and the mean to the square. So it's at least more than the difference you get for one value you choose. So here I choose the value x equals 0. So in the variance, I have the contribution in the big sum of the variance, at least of the probability to get 0. And what is the difference I get for 0? I get the difference between 0 and the expectation of x to the square. Okay? So it means that the probability here is less than the variance over, if I take this here, over the expectation of x to the square, and we say that the variance is about the same as the expectation, so it means that the probability that x is equal to 0 is less than 1 over the expectation of x. And the expectation of x, we proved before that it tends to infinity. Okay? This stuff tends to infinity. So the probability that there is 0 isolated nodes tends to 0. There is always one isolated node. Okay? Okay, let me try to phrase it in a more intuitive way so that you understand what happened here. If the probability for the variable to stay on 0 is something, okay, then the variance is at least this probability times the difference between this 0 and the expected value to the square. So the variance is at least in the order of magnitude of the square of the average. If the probability to stay on 0 does not tend to 0. If it's more than a constant, then the variance will be more than a constant times the expectation to the square. And we just proved before that it cannot be like this. The variance is in the order of magnitude not to the expectation to the square, but just of the expectation. Okay. So that's why it proves that this probability has to be very small to tend to 0. Okay. So that's why we need the concentration property to explain that if the expectation is big, then the probability to stay on 0 cannot stay a constant. It's because the variance in this case will be in the order of magnitude of the square of the expectation, and it's not. By our calculation, we show that it's the same order of magnitude as the expectation, not the expectation to the square. Okay, so we have this that there is the probability that there is at least one isolated node tends to 1, and so the network is disconnected with high probability. Let's make a 5-minute break and we continue with other properties. Okay? Okay, so I start again. So I need you to be silent so that I can talk. Thank you. So what we have proved is that if lambda is less than 1, then for sure you have some isolated nodes in the network. Okay, you have one part of the network which is not isolated nodes, but you have some isolated nodes and with very high probability, tends to 1. Now, for lambda less than 1. So now I want to consider the case where lambda is more than 1, and I want to prove that the network is connected. At least what it should mean is that there is no isolated nodes anymore. So we should check this, okay? So the expectation of the number of isolated nodes, we got it as n times n to the minus lambda, and you can see that it tends to 0 now when n tends to infinity because now we change for lambda more than 1. So here you have the essence of the threshold, right? If it's just if lambda is strictly less than 1 or lambda is strictly more than 1, it makes a big difference for the asymptotic behavior of this stuff. So that's why there is this threshold phenomenon. Just below, it's completely different of just above. Okay, so we know that there is no isolated nodes. It does not mean that the network is connected. For example, this network, it has no isolated nodes, but the network is not connected. So we need to show more. We need to show something much stronger to show that the network is actually connected. Just before I continue, let me do an announcement again that I did in the beginning of the lecture. We are waiting for your email addresses. So please write an email to Rémi Cazabe, who is in charge of the lecture, so that we get the full list of your emails and that we can contact you later. Also, I think he mentioned that I was offering some internship on this kind of topics. So not exactly like this, not so mathematics, more empirical on the network analysis, and also on graph algorithms. That's my stuff. So you should have an internship already by now, but in case you don't have and you are interested in this kind of subjects, complex network analysis and graph algorithms, so just come and talk with me if it's the case. So now I want to move from there is no isolated nodes to the network is connected. How can we go there? So first observe that if G is disconnected, it means that it's equivalent to there exists a bunch of K vertices that have no edges to the rest of the graph, to the remaining n minus K vertices. Okay, for some K which is less than half of the vertices, because I can always choose the smallest component, and the smallest component is less than half of the graph, right? Okay, so I have this. So what is the probability? Let's say that K vertices are not connected to the rest. As usual, it means that for all the edges connecting these K people here to the rest of the graph, all these edges have failed in my random experiment. For all of them, it was a non-edge, right? How many edges crossing between this K and this n minus K people? K times n minus K. So for all of them, they have failed with probability 1 minus P. I put a non-edge between them. Okay. So the probability that these K people in particular, they are not connected to the rest is exactly like this. So me, I'm interested in the probability that there exist K vertices that are not connected to the rest. If I talk about a fixed K, it's how to choose, like before, how to choose K vertices among n times for each of these configuration, K vertices among n, is this probability that these K vertices are not connected to the rest. Okay. And now what I want to do is that, just want to express that the fact that G is disconnected, it means that either there exists one vertex that is not connected to the rest, or two vertices that are not connected to the rest, or three vertices that are not connected to the rest. So it's a union on K of these events. And you know that the probability of a union of events is less than the probability, the sum of probability of all these events. It's exactly equal if the events are disjoint, and it's less if the events have some common domain. Okay, so I know that the probability that the graph is disconnected is not more than the sum of these probabilities, and I can sum only up to n divided by 2 because of this observation that there is always one of the components that has size less than n over 2. And so this I will not do. I did once, but it's really helpful, so I will not do again. This stuff, if you play with that, if you play hard, you can show that it tends to 0 when n tends to infinity. So if you like challenges, if you like analyzing this kind of expression, you can try to show that this sum actually tends to 0 when n tends to infinity. If I remember the proof, you need to cut the sum in two pieces and to control two pieces differently. And you can show like this. Okay? So I will not do, but believe me, this probability, this stuff, tends to 0 when n tends to infinity. So the probability that the graph is disconnected tends to 0. So for lambda just below 1, probability of isolated vertices 1. For lambda just above 1, probability that the graph is disconnected is 0. It's surely connected. And that's what we wanted to show for the connectivity threshold. Okay. now let's move to the more funny part of this. So it's again the same kind of analysis. I'm sorry if it did not catch you in the first thing, but with more interesting arguments, I think, for understanding what is the structure of this random stuff. Okay. So now what I want that we prove is that there is a certain threshold, which is exactly 1/n, that determine whether, so I come much lower in probability. Okay. Now, so before, when I talk about Pn is about log n over n, it means average degree of, what is the average degree in this network? It's log n, right? Because the average degree is the probability times n minus 1. Okay? You play n minus 1 for your n minus 1 possible neighbors. You play with probability p. So this stuff times n minus 1, it's about log n. So the stuff that is above the over n, it's the average degree. Okay? So here in this network, the average degree is 1. It's very low. Okay. So can you really have a giant component with this low average degree? Yes. If it's so now we take the average degree is lambda, and if lambda is more than 1, you will have a giant component. If lambda is less than 1, you will have very small components only. Okay. What is the average degree of a tree? To know where we are. What is the average degree of a tree? I know I have computer scientists in there, so you have to answer this. It's a matter of honor for you. Average degree is the how much? The mean of the number of what? Yes, but for a tree, what does it give? It's the average degree. It's what I denoted k before. It's about twice the number of edges divided by the number of vertices. Because when you sum all the degree of the graph, you know it's twice the number of edges. When you sum the degree, you count 2 times every edge. You count 1 time with this vertex, 1 time with this vertex. Okay? So when you sum the degree, you get 2m. You divide by the number of vertices. So this is the average degree of a graph. Okay? And in a tree, you know that m is about n. Okay? So here, when we in a tree, I don't know where to write. In a tree, the average degree is about 2. And here we are at average degree lower than a tree. So it means we cannot expect to be connected, but we can expect that a constant fraction, that the edges will concentrate on a constant fraction of the nodes of the network, making them connected. This happens if lambda is, less than 2, but at least more than 1. And if it's strictly less than 1, it does not happen. It's very small. So it's very binary, as I said. It's very funny to observe this kind of behavior. So again, we show a stronger statement just on the constant. Okay, as I said, if lambda is less than 1, the maximum size is negligible in front of log n. Okay, for every a, as small as you want, the probability that the maximum size of the connected component is at least a times log n 10 to 0. Okay, for every a equal 1 over 1,000, 1 over 1 million. And if lambda on the opposite is more than 1, then the probability that the maximum size is there exists a b, a constant fraction of the vertices, so that the probability that the maximum size of the connected component is at least this constant fraction of the nodes 10 to 1. Okay. So that's what we want to prove. So let's prove the first part, that if lambda is less than 1, what happens? To prove this stuff for the first and the second part, I will need this interesting process. It's called the Galton-Watson branching process. What happens is that you do a genealogy tree in a random way. You start with a single individual and you give to this individual xi descendant, where xi is a random variable with a distribution of probability pk. The probability that xi equal to k is pk. Okay. So with a certain probability, it will have 0 descendant, 1 descendant, 2 descendant, 3 descendant, etc. And the expectation of this random variable, you take it as mu, and you say that the variance is not 0. It means it does not always give the same number, because if it always gives the same number, it's deterministic, and the tree is infinite. If it does not always give the same number, it has a certain probability to stop, and that's the kind of thing we study on this branching process. So let's call, it's not so, I should make a drawing here. So you have the initial individual. It will have a certain number of neighbors with some probability. Each of them, they will have a certain number of descendants, not neighbors, with a certain probability. And sometimes they have 0 descendant, and sometimes they have some. Okay. All this is a probabilistic stuff. And what I call Z0 is the 1, is the number of people in the first in the 0 generation. What I call Z1 is the number of people in the first generation. What I call Z2, it's not very well done, is this stuff, the number of people in the second one. And here it's Z3 after number of generation. Okay. And the question I have is whether it will stop or not, this process, depending on the probabilities. So I call Zk the number of individuals in the case generation. And I observe that Z0 is always 1, and Z1 is exactly my random variable. Okay? Because the number of descendants of this first individual is the random variable. Z2 is the sum for I equal 1 to Z1, the number of individuals in the first generation, of this random variable. So to the A, it means copy the copy number I of this random variable. So they all have here, they all play with the same random variable. Okay. So if you compute the expectation of Z1 is the expectation of xi, it's mu as we define it here, and the expectation of Z2, so it's the expectation of it's the expectation of Z2 knowing Z1. So here it will be mu. So if you know Z1, if you fix Z1, the expectation of this stuff will be Z1 times the expectation of this stuff, because they are all the same, this random variable. So it will be mu times Z1. Okay, and if you take the expectation over Z1, then you get again mu for Z1, so it should be mu squared. And like this, you can show in the same way by recursion that the expectation of the number of individuals in the k's generation is mu to the k. Okay, so it's an exponential growing process. Okay, so now you can guess that it will stop or not depending on mu is more or less than 1. Okay, if mu is more than 1, it will go forever. If with a high probability, if mu is less than 1, it will stop at some point. Okay, it's exactly the same like the birth rate that you need to regenerate a population, right? Because here it's not by couple; it's one individual gives new individuals alone, so it should be more than 1 per individual. If it's by couples, it should be more than 2. Okay, you know you have to get at least 2 childs. Okay. So now we can prove one. So let's denote by Bn lambda over n. It means the binomial random variable with n trials. So I do n trials of this random variable with a probability of success lambda over n. Okay, so here why I use this this stuff is because here the number of descendant you have is exactly you play with probability lambda over n over the n minus 1 possibilities. So here I'm looking at the Herbert-Schroeder graph process, okay? So it means that here I choose a node and I wonder how many, so I look in the graph how many neighbors he will have. For each of the n minus 1 possible, he played with a probability lambda over n because I choose Pn as lambda over n, okay? So he played with this probability to know if they are the neighbors or not. So the number of neighbors it have is the result of these random variables played n minus 1 time. I toss a coin n minus 1 time with probability lambda over n of success. It's a biased coin. And when I play with the next one, let's say that it has 3 neighbors. When I play with the next generation, I play with only n minus 4 vertices. Why? Because now I'm parsing, I'm searching the graph in a breadth first search way, okay? So it means that the new people I can discover here, they are not among this one. So I play only with n minus 4 to know how many new individuals will be in the next generation of this process. So this is what happened in the graph, okay? In the graph, this number change here, and this probability does not change because everyone has played with the same probability. Every edge was played with the same probability. So this stuff, which is too much complicated because you can have some conflicts, okay? Like two guys will be adjacent to the same one in the next generation. Also, you can have some edges between 2 guys of the same generation. Can you have some edges like this? I'll do it in blue. Can you have some edges like the blue one here? So if you cannot answer, I was not clear enough on what I'm doing. I'm searching the graph in a breadth first manner. So I start from one vertex, I go to all its neighbors, and I continue. For each of them, I go to all the new neighbors, okay? And again, I extend the ball of radius around my initial vertex. So here, no, you cannot have this because if you had an edge here, I would have discovered this guy in the first generation. Okay? So it's like a breadth first search. You cannot, it's really a process of distance by distance. You cannot have some shortcuts between 2 levels of generations. All the edges are between 2 consecutive generations or inside one generation, but not jumping over one generation. Okay? So you don't have edges like this. But so it's you have a lot of edges that I don't like this one and this one that go to the same stuff. In my perfect world, I would like the process to be like this. Okay, to be really like the Galton-Watton process. It means that the random variable here and here is exactly the same. I play the same number of times with the same probability like in the beginning. Okay, so please let me allow me to play this game instead of this one. Okay, and I will see what is the relationship between the two. So me, I want to play this game because in this game I understand very well. It's what the analysis we did before. Is we know exactly what is the expectation of the number of individuals in the generation number k. Okay, so I'm pleased with that. And I don't need to play this complicated game because I just want. What I know is that if I call zkg the number of people in the k generation of this one, and so this is zkg and this is zpk. No, wait, okay, it's okay. Like this. What I know for sure is that there are less people here than here, because here I expand less good because some of the edges are between 2 nodes in the same generation. This does not explain the number of individuals in the next generation, and also unfortunately they are not all different the people I choose in the next generation. So this one expand further, expand faster than this one. And then I have this property that here the number of individuals is less than the number of individuals in that one. But it's enough for my purpose that I want to prove that there is no giant component. So I want to prove that this process, when lambda is less than 1, I want to prove that this process in the graph will stop very fast. And I'm just saying that it stops faster than this one. This one expands more, so lives longer. So let's take a lambda less than 1, and let's call Si the number of nodes in the connected component of vertex I. So the expectation of Si is the sum over k, so to the infinite, k more than 0, of the number of individuals in each generation of this graph process. Okay, I look at this graph process, possibly going to infinity, and I sum all the people I discover. Totally, this is the number of people I have in my connected component. So it would have to stop because of the finiteness of the graph, but I sum, the sum is, the k is unbounded in the sum. Okay, and I know that it's less than what happened in the Galton-Wanton process that approximate it, and that this one is possibly going to infinity. But it does not go to infinity because we chose lambda less than 1. So lambda is exactly, for this random variable, this one, lambda is exactly the mean. Okay, the expectation of this stuff is exactly lambda. When I play n times with probability lambda over n, I win lambda times. So the expectation of this stuff is lambda, and we prove that the number of individuals in the k generation number k is, in this case, so lambda to the k. So I have the sum over k of lambda to the k, okay, and the sum of the k more than 0, okay, possibly to infinity, but because lambda is less than 1, this is the sum of decreasing exponential, and it stops. It's finite. It's 1 over 1 minus lambda. Okay. The sum until n is 1 to the n, and n tends to infinity. So, and lambda is less than 1, so this stuff tends to 1. Okay. So that's when I have this. Okay. So what it says? It says that the expected number of nodes in the connected component of vertex I is a constant. I don't care about what is the constant, but it's a constant. And me, I want to prove that there is no giant component. Is it enough? I just prove that the expected size of the connected component of one guy is a constant. Is it enough to prove that with probability close to 1, there is no giant component? There may be a giant component sometime, but it's with a probability tending to 0. Is it enough? So I claim it's enough. I claim it's enough. Why? Because imagine so me what I want to prove is that it's not true that for a constant number of a constant proportion of the time, the network has a giant component. So when it has a giant component, it means a component more than a constant times the number of vertices. So it will means I have a component like this, and this stuff is more than alpha n. Okay. If it's like this, a proportion for a proportion of the network that is a constant, then this expectation I claim it's not constant. Because for each of these guys, the size of its component is alpha n, okay, and they are alpha n of them. So if you sum the size of the component of all these guys, if you sum it for all these guys, you obtain something that scales as n square. And when you divide by n the total number of stuff in the network, you get something that scales as n. Okay? So if there was a constant proportion of the time, a constant fraction of the guys together in one single component, this could not be a constant. This would have to be scaling like n. Okay? So if it's a constant, it's not like this. And what I cannot show, so this okay, but what I cannot show is that what I promised in the beginning. I said that actually we can show stronger. We can show that the maximum size of all these components is negligible in front of log n. They are all of size log n or less. For a, because negligible because it's for every constant a, okay, as small as you want. So this I cannot show, but this is one result on this. So you already go from the situation where the connected components are smaller than log n for lambda for a probability like this with lambda less than 1, okay, and you go to the situation for lambda more than 1 where almost everyone, not almost everyone, but a constant fraction of them, 50% or 80%, is together in the same component. Okay, so it's a little bit surprising, this threshold property. Okay. Okay. Let me prove the other direction. Do I have really time to do this? Maybe not. Let's try. Okay, I will do it in a nutshell. Okay. So now I want to prove that on the opposite, and that's the more interesting part. So I feel pity that I don't have much time left, but I want to prove that if lambda is more than 1, then I will get a giant component. So how can we do this? I want to show that the same thing I did before. I want to show that the expected size of the component of one guy is large. But because I want to prove it's large, now I cannot ignore the conflicts that I had before in the graph process, okay? Because when I wanted to prove that it's small, if there is some conflicts, it's okay because I will prove that this is small. But now I want to prove that this is large, and it's not larger than this, okay? So I want to check, I want to say that this and this, it's the same time, it's the same size, until some generation, because in the few first generation, when I did not discover much of the graph, the probability of getting a conflict is small. It's when I start to have a big proportion of the graph that I will have a lot of conflicts. Okay, so what you can do is that you can compute this probability of getting the expected number of conflicts of this type that you will obtain at going from generation k to k plus 1. You can compute it, and I will not do it because it's too long. It's very easy to compute it. You just say that you know the number of people here, and you have to say that two of them, with which probability two of them will go to the same neighbor. It's with probability p square, and they have how many possibilities of doing this? They have n nodes, okay, n possible nodes to do this. Okay, so. And you have also to take into account what I did not write explicitly, that you have also some conflict because of ages in the same between people of the same generation, and this you can show that is the same order of magnitude as this one. You can do the computation if you are interested in this. It's very easy. And with that, what you get is that you get the number of expected conflicts. But this stuff, I don't know what is that. I said I know what is the expectation of zk, but I don't know what is the expectation of zk square. So again, I will do a shortcut. If you study the Galton-Walton process, you can show that zk is very concentrated around its mean. We showed that the mean is mu to the k, but actually it's very concentrated around the mean, like a Poisson variable, and the variance is the same like the mean. So the expectation of zk is lambda k. The variance is also lambda k. And with that, if I put it back in this expression, I can express precisely what is this expectation of zk square. Then I get lambda to the 2k. And finally, I get that this stuff, when does conflicts become non-negligible anymore, is when this stuff is in the order of magnitude of 1. When it's less than 1, it means the expected number of conflicts I will get for one generation is less than 1. And I start to say, okay, it starts to be non-negligible when it's 1 and above. Okay. So when it becomes 1, it's when lambda k is like square root of n. So it means if you get it back in the expectation of the number of individuals in your component, you can sum until k is log base lambda of square root of n. And when you do the sum, you realize that this stuff, so this is the moment where conflicts become non-negligible anymore. Before, you can do the approximation with using the perfect process. And you realize that before it becomes non-negligible, you already have square root of n people in your component. Okay? So the expectation of the size of your component is more than square root of n. Okay. So with that, you can, with the concentration of Poisson variable, because they are very concentrated around their mean, you can show that the probability that your component is at least square root is more than a constant. It means that you have a fraction of the nodes that are in components of size at least square root of n that is more than a constant fraction of the nodes. Okay, so we are not done yet, and what is beautiful is this. So I will let you with that. It's that, so you have some small components, very small maybe, and you have some components that scale like square root of n. You have some of them, and you would like to show that actually you have one very big one that scales like n. Okay, and what is nice is that if you consider two connected components that are of size at least square root of n, what is the probability to have at least one edge between them? You have square root of n people on this side that try to connect to square root of n people on the other side, okay, with probability p. So the number of chance you have to connect is square root of n times square root of n. It's n. It's about n. Here you have about n edges crossing, okay, and you all place them with a probability that is like lambda over n. So in expectation, you will get lambda edges crossing. And when lambda is more than 1, you will get at least one edge crossing. Okay? So it means that if the expectation is more than 1, it means that is a constant. It means that the probability that to connect is at least a constant. And because of this, these components that we can show that they are not so small, they are at least square root of n, they have a constant probability to connect, and they connect in a very big stuff of order n. The exact way, maybe not exact, but the more rigorous way to show it is to consider the smallest of these square root of n sized components, and you can show that the probability that is not connected to all the rest of the square root of n sized component, which is the definition of what connected component is not connected to the rest, the probability that is like this tends to 0. So with probability 1, they all connect together, and we showed before that the number of individuals involved in this kind of components is a constant fraction, and they all connect together with probability 1. So it means that with probability 1, you have a constant fraction of individuals in the same connected component. I think I will stop here, and if you have questions, it's time to ask. So next time, for the next lecture, I will talk about a completely different subject and less formal. We'll talk about community detection algorithm. There is less mathematics and maybe more intuitive. So if you were a little bit afraid of what happened today, just come and have a look. Next time it will be different. Okay?